Hey, welcome everybody. It's episode 3, and we are going to do a deep dive on some grading companies today. This is the grading episode. I'm your host, Nick, Cardboard Legacy. We've got, this way. We got Robert over here. He's our co-host, Cardboard Squares. So thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to get through topics about grading companies. Are there too many in the industry? What pricing would you expect to sell do you get on the back end after you've paid for your grading services? What is the difference between some of those types of cards? Also, we're going to talk about pricing turnaround for the grading companies. We're going to do a whole segment on why are we going to grade cards? What is the purpose? What is the end goal? What is the result? And then we're going to talk about the future of grading and what that might look like in 5 to 10 years. And then our last segment today is going to be our favorite graded cards that we have. So I'm excited for this episode. I think that grading is a pretty hot topic right now. There's a lot of cool things happening in the space. Robert's been following it really close. I've been paying attention to it because I've got a bunch of cards that I want to send in. I know you do too. And it's just, it's kind of nuts out there. So it's a pretty fuzzy landscape. What do we know? What do we know about grading companies? Are there too many of them? I mean, how many are there out there? Is there 30? I mean, if you count every tiny little bobblehead that's popped up.
I would say that there's probably at least that many. I didn't dive that far deep, but I mean, there's easily 10 that are going around from different chat rooms, different various Reddit forums, all over Instagram. I mean, I think 5 or 6 different ones in front of me alone.
Sure.
I've been trying that with the biggest ones. So for me, I don't know that if there's too many or if maybe companies just haven't found their spot yet, or really if we as consumers and people, whether we're hobby enthusiasts, collector enthusiasts, or we're trying to turn this into a small business or entrepreneurial, if we figured out which ones that we need to be going for in those different directions.
Cool, man. So we've got about 5 or 6 that we kind of are maybe going to talk about today, because the rest of them just don't have enough volume for us to really have our attention or any details about them on it, So Robert, go ahead and start off and tell us about the OGs in the industry.
I mean, the first 2 that come to mind with anybody that's been around the hobby for as long as it's been around, the 60s, 70s. Back then, there was no grading. Then we hit, the 80s, early 90s junk wax era.
Big boom.
Terrible, the overprinting. And then someone decided, hey, we should make some kind of company that can grade these cards, put them into a condition, encase them, protect them. And that's when we're going to have your PSA and your BGS. The first 2 on the market, the most well-known. You go to card shows, you go online, you look around on eBay. It's going to be the most prominent slabs that you see for sale. And if you've been around the hobby for the past year, you've known that both have shut down to over-committing on grading, and they can't get through it fast enough. And I believe that that's kind of where things come in. I mean, it took you, a year to get back your order?
No, I don't have it back yet. So we talked in the last episode that I have my PSA order that I submitted in February of last year. And then it just went into grading process. They've been in research phase for 9 months, I think it's been. So
here's a good question. When you sent that in, at what level did you send it in, and what was the expected turnaround time?
That was bulk. That was a bulk order. So I think it was like $12 a card because I sent 31 cards. And so I paid bulk on that. But I didn't have a great expectation, understanding that they were getting a lot of people sending in orders, and at $12 a card, I get that. But to see it just sit there and then have them like open up parts of grading, like some of the different levels open back up after they closed, and it's just kind of sad to watch all these cards get pumped through and yours just sit there and wait and wait and wait. So I don't know that it's completely fair, but aside from that, I'm hoping to be happy once I get my submission back.
Yeah. So as most of us know who have been around here, but if you don't know and you're getting into the hobby, PSA, BGS are your top tier grading companies, people that have been respected due to the fact that they've been in the industry for the longest. They're the godfathers, the OGs of grading cards.
For real.
So PSA has a different range of pricing that goes anywhere from $100 a card, which is their regular price right now, up to $600 a card, which is the walkthrough service. The turnaround time minimum right now for PSA is going to be 3 months, 90 to 100 days. That's bare minimum. Even with them being backlogged as they are, I really don't think that those timeframes are going to be true, but that's going to be, your express 3 month, 90-day, your regular. I didn't even see a time frame on there. They said they'll email you with updates. And from looking at the website itself, it was one of the more, I don't want to say hidden, but one of the more difficult ones to actually find turnaround times, legitimacies on those times, what they were going to be. But I will say that the one true benefit of PSA as a grading company is going to be the ability to grade almost anything. So whether it be a tobacco card, an oversized card, a ticket, a pack of cards, whatever it may be, that truly is, I believe, one of the strongest things for PSA, and why they are still in the position that they are in is the fact that their umbrella covers anything in the hobby that you want to have graded or protected.
That, and not everybody does the full DNA auto authentication. That's a pretty big deal when you're talking about potentially millions of dollars for an autographed card.
I mean, that's like, personally for me, I'm an SGC guy all the way. They do not do offhand autographs. So if your autograph is not from the product itself, they will not authenticate the autograph. They're not there yet. But as time goes on, I hope that maybe they can get some authenticators in there to allow that process. But I also thoroughly enjoy that they haven't tried to hire one or two and tell them to do it, and then it takes them 6 months to a year to get those cards back to you. So that's
right. No expectation for it.
Exactly. That's one thing I will say is that SGC and a lot of these companies have been very upfront with being backlogged. I mean, PSA coming and actually shutting down and not taking submissions. I mean, that's huge for any company to do. I mean, that's like a restaurant shutting down and saying, we're not taking orders for a year because we're so backlogged. I mean, it's just great for them, bad for us, but it is what it is. So PSA being that huge advantage of being able to grade everything puts them in that number one spot. Then we move over to BGS, BVVG, BCG. They have a couple different things that with the vintage, modern, new age, this, that, the other.
Yep, different slabs, different colored labels. They got a few tricks up their sleeve.
And more so indeed. And so they have some slightly better turnaround times, I think, but I still say that their times are not 100% authentic that they promote. There are still been many people that do a certain service, and whether it's 4 days, whether it's an extra 10 days, or even, they've publicly put on their website, economy right now is 12 plus months.
Holy cow. Yeah. I mean, at least they're being honest though.
Yeah. And it's very good to see that up front, but this becomes one of those situations where, which we'll speak about in later topics, but we'll brush on it real fast, is why are we grading? If it's a PC card, BGS might be for you. It might be something that if you don't care about not having it for right now and you just want it protected in a well-known name that hopefully maybe down the road it becomes monetarily valuable to you,
right?
That might be the service for you. But they run from their standard right now is $30 a card, 50 with subs, which is a big thing due to PSA doing subs almost automatically. So with the subgrades, I find that I much rather prefer to see the subgrades on a card to know where it might be lacking.
Yep.
Not only for the card itself, but also for future knowledge.
Sure, just to be able to learn from it.
Exactly. Like yep. I was never a grader before this year. I've tried out different companies, trying to do different things, see what it is. And to this date, I don't think I have. I think I've only received 110. Oh, two tens.
Okay.
Both of which were from PSA. So with the way that people have been talking about PSA, is it because they're too lenient or are they actual 10s? That's always going to be an interesting topic. But the one thing about BGS is it's almost a 50% to 100% incline for getting your card graded with subgrades versus without. So standard 6 to 9 month turnaround time, 30 without, 50 with.
Hmm.
Their Express, 100 without, 150 with. The Premium, which is a 10 to 15 day turnaround, so even closer to probably a month right there, is 125 without and 250 with subgrades.
Dang.
So it's when we start getting into the secondary market, we'll talk about where those subgrades will come into play and how much they actually affect the card.
Right on. Yeah, they do make a difference. I like subgrades. I wish that you didn't have to pay extra for it. I wish they had just an all in like all the other ones do it, where it's you pay for it and you just get subgrades if they do subgrades on cards. I think that's a better way to go instead of having some, BGS 9 with no subgrades and you're like, oh, okay, well, what is this? As far as it's true grade, because that's just a real in-betweener anyway. It's almost like a PSA 8.5, probably. So, it's a tough spot to be in, to know where it lacks and to be okay with that. If you can't spot it on the card, as you're trying to maybe purchase that card, that's it's a better place to be when you've got subgrades. So I wish they would just do it on all their pricing and just kind of combine it, and just make it part of their normal process.
I do too. I wish it was a norm across, I guess, the whole society or business that
Yeah,
you're
all of
involved in.
grading.
You
Why
know,
can't why can't every single one of them just kind of use a very similar way to do it? I mean, they're already doing that anyway.
exactly. And so, after your first two big ballers, we start to get into, a company that's been around for, almost as long as PSA and BGS, and that's going to be your SGC. Now, until PSA had their kind of lockdown, lockout, not taking anything, SGC was considered purely to be a vintage company. And with PSA going down, you saw a lot of people that want to get cards graded for shows, for sales, for just
Hmm.
protection purposes start to go there, realizing that they are a very substantial and good grading company. I mean, if you don't know, go look it up. The Horace Wagner that's sold from SGC is one of the highest price sold cards ever. That's coming from SGC. So any baseball fan will tell you that they are a very well-known source in that realm. It's one of the most rare, scarce cards that we know in the hobby. So the fact that you see a lot of them graded with SGC gives me all the hope in the world that they're a true and legitimate grading company. And that's why, for me personally, I've gone with them. I also like, their little catchphrase of tuxedo time and how the cards look in the tuxedo.
They do look
Uh,
really nice.
but it's one of those things there, even with that, if they change up to a clear or a smoky case, will we get a higher conversion rate from people using PSA to get a better turnaround time? Um, right now, SGC offers three different levels. Their slowest level is a 30-day turnaround. So for me, 25-day turnaround for $30 a card, which is not bad across the board. I mean, you look at the regular price for PSA, which is going to be a 3-month turnaround, so 90 days for $100. You look at the closest one that we'll get to with BGS is going to be their Express, which is a 15 to 20-day service for $100 with no subgrades, 150 with subs.
Sure. So that sucks. BGS is the most expensive.
And then you go to SGC for a 25-day service, $30 a card. So I think this is where you're going to see a lot more play and wiggle room and maybe the under $1,000 cards where you don't want to have 10 to 20% of the card invested between shipping, insurance, grading, time, all that kind of stuff. So, if you have a card that, is selling right now at $1,000 in a PSA 10, is it going to be worth the same amount in 3 to 6 months?
Right.
And anybody in the hobby knows prices change every day, change every week, change every month, so on and so forth. So I think for me personally, and for a lot of people that we're seeing across the board, just as general, SGC is becoming the kind of go-to company right now. The biggest thing for them, can you keep up with it?
Right. Demand. Can you stay ahead of everything that's coming your way? Because I feel like it's really, really strong right now for them. I bet they're getting just bombarded with orders. And, we hear from them occasionally. They release updates. I see their Instagram feed, and I haven't heard them talk about being in any sort of backlog, and I haven't heard anybody complaining about any of their turns. So, I think they're in a really good spot right now. I trust them. I think they do a really good job. I trust BGS and I trust PSA. I just like money more than I like my grades, as far as spending it, I guess. Um, People talk about resale value. We're going to talk about that in a little bit after we get through a couple more of these companies, but literally how much do you want to pay for that extra resale value, and will it always be there?
And that's the thing is, it's if you're getting a card that you know is only going to sell for between 80 to $100, but you want to get it sold. Let's say baseball. Okay, so we're Marchish going into April here shortly. Are we actually already in April? No, we're still,
Almost 2 days away.
so we have opening day coming up soon. So if you want to have a baseball player, by the first month of season, the only company to grade with right now to have that back is going to be SGC. Now, let's say that you have someone who's a stud, who's not a rookie, who's not really going to flux so much, like a Tatis, even though with injury, I still say he's a stronghold. Your Shohei Otanis, your Mike Trouts. You want to have all those kind of stuff back for sale by October, going into the playoffs for baseball, which is, let me pull up a calendar real quick to make sure any of these other companies can do it and it's still worth your while. So,
Yeah, I don't know if everybody's playing quick turns, but if you are, there's really only like two options. There's
yeah,
there's two companies that can get those cards out to you in less than 3 months.
I mean, you can get them back just as fast, but the price to do that,
Oh, it
which
doesn't
would
make
just
sense.
it
It's
would kill the thought.
astronomical. Yep.
So
Yep.
we have 6 months till September, which is going to be the end of the regular season, going into playoff time. So the standard, which is the $30 with BGS, you might have your card back.
Yeah, you
Maybe,
might. You might.
but you might not. So the only way to guarantee that is to do these upgraded services. And if you figure once you have your card, it's going to be maybe 100, 150 as that graded 10. If you're paying $100 for an express service to have it, and you have $20 to $25 maybe into the card itself already, I mean, you're going to break even at best with any kind of resale.
Yeah, I
So
mean, maybe make a couple of bucks, but then you waited for all the hassle for what, really, in the end, kind of.
exactly.
But if it's, I think people that aren't really concerned with the turn, maybe these next couple of companies would be interested in the kind of custom stuff that they're offering.
Yeah, and we're moving on to what I consider to be the next two in the list. And first one's going to be CSG, a company that has also been around for quite a while, grading, certifying, authenticating different things, but they just dipped their toes into the sports card world. I think one fact that people need to realize is that eBay has signed a deal. If anybody has noticed, if you purchase a card over $500 or more now, it has to go through CSG to be authenticated. So I think that that's a good aspect of eBay taking on that kind of last step to make sure that people aren't being fraudulated online and being taken advantage of,
Hmm.
but also the fact that they used CSG
Sure.
and not a JSA or PSA or any of those other authenticators shows you that they have the knowledge and the know-how behind these things to get those things done. When you're talking about, I don't even want to talk about the number of monetary sales on eBay every year.
Right.
It's got to be
It's huge.
way
It's
way up there. So for them to
bajillions.
trust a company like CSG, who is new-ish to the sports card market, but been around for a very long time on certifying and authenticating coins, money, anybody in
Comics.
the comic book world is
Yep.
going to know who CSG is.
Yep.
And for those of you not in the comic book world, it's just as big, if not bigger, than the sports card world. Some of
Mhm.
those comics are millions of dollars. So I know that they've been going through some changes, which I believe you, Nick, have kind of dipped into a little bit more with the
Oh
new
gosh, their
label.
new, yeah, that new label is really, really gorgeous. I like it a lot. The whole new slab. I mean, it was well thought out, and I think they were listening, because people talked about it being pretty ugly from the beginning. And, the green label for their money or whatever. I don't even know if they have green labels for their money stuff, but whatever the first green label was, that was something out of a horror movie. I don't know. That was real bad for me. I did not enjoy that one at all. So them upgrading their label makes them, to me, a so much more viable option, just because it looks a little nicer, a little smoother, and I think it's just more eye appeal in general. So I think it's a win for them.
And I think that will be up for us in the secondary market to determine and see how much it changes for them, which is going to be a very interesting watch and a relook on in probably say 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, I would say so. So yeah, the CSG, I think I'll submit some cards to them now that they have a changed label.
And their prices are again in that very kind of easier kind of way where it's not killing our pockets to get cards back. They have everything from a bulk 45-day turnaround to a walkthrough 3-day service. The crazy part that I saw, which I did not know, but doing the research found out that their bulk is only $12 a card.
And it's got to be how many? 20?
I think it was 25 plus.
Okay. That's not bad though.
It's really not. And if it's a true 45-day turnaround, I mean, for anybody that's really looking into it, that's baseball, a third of the way in, football into the preseason timing. So it's one of those things where it's a very pliable company to get the cards back in time for any shows you might have coming up, any games that you might think be a big changer. But it's just that, even on their site, they literally have numerous times. Turnarounds are estimates and not guarantees.
Sure. Everybody says that though.
So it was one of the websites that I saw the most heavy on.
Okay.
So I think that's them trying just to warn, we don't know where we're at, whether, I think there's something that people don't take into consideration is release dates of product as well. So as we have new releases coming out, these companies are going to have droves and droves and droves of cards coming in.
Yep.
So that's one thing that I think that people need to look into is don't try to send in a 1 or 2 card order or a smaller order the same week or within the same 10 days of a new product release, even though we have products being released all the time now.
Mm-hmm.
But the names, the optics, the prisms,
the big ones, like especially retail.
Exactly. So I think that's a big thing for people getting into the industry or trying to learn their way around the system. That's a calendar that you need to look at and integrate into your grading world as well, just so that you kind of have an idea of what their expectancy is going to be looking like. But I mean, even their 7 day, $60 a card for 7 days, to me is not bad.
That's pretty decent, man. I mean, if you got a high dollar card that you want to turn before, the next week, the semifinals, the championship, the whatever.
I mean, the way I look at it is, let's call it like it is. 2022 Series 1 baseball. You just went and bought a hobby box with your kids, with your buddies, whatever you're doing, you're cracking it. You pull a Wander Auto. You pull a Wander Refractor, whatever it may be, and you want that ready for opening day. Well, that's 1 week from now.
Yeah, it sure is.
So if they could stay true to those times, that's one of those situations where it could be very, very pliable, and you might see a lot of baseball coming out of the CSG world. But I've also noticed that with the CSG, I see a lot of the TCGs, the Marvel cards. I see a lot of that stuff going through them simply because of the fact of the comic book grading and all that. So they know those eras and products quite well.
Yep.
So CSG for me is definitely one of those, keep your eye on them, because we might see a heavy, heavy flux of those in the market over the next 3 to 6 months.
Right on. I dig that. I'm probably going to submit to them, so I'll be one of the people contributing to the market.
And then lastly, we're going to talk about probably a lesser known grading company, but someone threw out my research and my homework, and I wouldn't have done it unless Nick told me about them, honestly, is RCG. So right now their costing is extremely, extremely great. Their express 3 to 5 day service is $65 a card.
Boom.
So that's your same as your 7 day service for CSG. You're not going to be able to touch it even at any other one. I mean, even with the 10 day over at SGC, it's $40. The 5-day is $75. So if you're right there in the middle, it's the most bang for your buck. The biggest thing with RCG is the slabs themselves. Through the reviews that I've done are going to be your closest to your PSA size for stacking, transporting, laying out. If you have, cases that, hold exactly 90 PSA cards, most likely you're going to hold 90 RCG cards as well. But for me, I'm looking at them as I'm going to definitely be doing a submission with them probably next week for some PC cards. See how it is, see if the turnaround is really that well. But as Nick has, and I would like to display that, the slabs themselves, they have a specific thing that they're doing, which is a print on slab technology. So this is, we've all seen everyone trying to change up the market, CSG changing their labels. There's a company out there, HGA, which had a little color pop label. I believe RCG will be the HGA killer. HGA had a lot of issues, whether it was names on cards with slabs coming in bent, so on and so forth. These labels are gorgeous. As you can see, the coloring goes all the way through the screen, all the way around the card. They try to match it to each card that they get, which I find to be quite nice. So it's just one of those companies that might be new to the market, might be a lesser known name, but I mean, I don't care who you are. Some of us, we all buy stuff from Walmart. And sometimes that stuff from Walmart, I mean, that's how we got to look at it is some people like to shop at Whole Foods all the time. That's going to be your PSA. Some people go to, your Publix or your Kroger's. That's going to be your BGS and your SGC. This is right now, it's Walmart-ish only due to brand recognition.
Right.
But as this company, I believe, will get more and more use, I think that you're going to start seeing them a lot of places. I think that they are absolutely gorgeous. They have some specific labels that only go out, for 1 in 50, 1 in 200, 1 in 100. And I believe one of them went out was a 22 karat plated Cronenworth card that was out of a random out of 200. So it's a solid gold label. It looked gorgeous.
That's cool.
So it's just one of those things it's like a relationship, whether it be a friendship, whether it be a spouse, whatever it is, you got to bring some things to that relationship to kind of keep it spicy, whether it's taking your best friend to his, hometown game, taking the wife out to a nice dinner. So I look at RCG as being that spice being brought to the hobby.
I like it.
I think it's really going to change things up. And that's kind of like, in my opinion, the top, not necessarily the top 5, but the 5 grading companies that I'm looking into at the moment and just what's going on in the market.
Kind of the most interesting and on the move. I do like, even though I knew about them before I picked up that Brett Favre card, I do really actually like the slab itself with the extra design in it. I like that they have subgrades, and it sounds like they're reasonable on turnaround and affordability. So,
their subgrades are automatically included in their price. That was something I forgot to mention. It is no add-on. Every single card they grade gets subgrades.
That's perfect.
Coming up in our next topic is going to be a big, strong factor in everything.
Right on. So now we're going to discuss, after you've gotten a card graded by one of these companies and, you need to sell it, you're just in it to sell it. You don't want to sell it. You have to sell it. What's it worth? What's its value? I mean, the question about what is it actually worth? And there's a huge difference between some of these companies right now in the marketplace. And, I think Robert probably backed me up on this, but we're going to see shifts in that over time. You're going to see some of those numbers from PSA maybe come down on certain levels of cards, and you're going to see some of the numbers for, let's say, SGC and BGS come up a little bit because there's too much gap in some of these things. And there's a lot of people out there talking about it and starting to notice that. So, there's really, really good examples out there. And I think, Robert, you have one about a Babe Ruth card.
Yeah, recently just sold both cards going to be graded in an 8. One in an SGC tuxedo, one in a PSA, old school red, white label, nothing pretty about it. PSA sells for just over $101,000. within the same, I think it was six to 10 days were these sales differentiated. But a SGC 8 of that same Babe Ruth card sold for $51,000.
That's incredible. You're talking about having two.
100% difference.
Yeah, you're talking about having two of them versus one of them. I mean,
Exactly.
in this game, in the hobby, in this collecting business or sport or however you see it, pastime, two of the same card is way better than one.
And it's just, one of the things that crazes me is that PSA has always been kind of known as that modern company. Yes, we see the old Bowmans, the old Tops, and some of the vintage in PSA. But when you dive deep into the market, the vintage market primarily is dominated by SGC. So in realms and consideration of that, it's just hard for me to fathom how a PSA gets 2x what
Right.
an SGC card gets when people were knocking SGC 6 months ago, calling them a vintage company.
Sure. I
So
mean,
how is it that your vintage experts are worth less than your modern experts? So that's just one of those. Always question it. Always look into it. Do your homework,
right.
and make sure the purchase is within your realm. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Is a card is only as valuable as what somebody's willing to pay for it.
Absolutely 100% true. Another one to point out is actually we've got this Kobe SGC 10 right here, and we were looking it up pre-show today to look at the price differences, and we came up with a minimum of $300 difference between the PSA 10 and the SGC 10. You've got listings on eBay of people trying to get PSA 10 money with their SGC 10s. None of those have sold. But the average, sale, it looks to be about $400, but I'd give it a couple extra bucks. I think you could probably get one for about $700-800, but PSA is going for about $1050, and that's doesn't seem right. You know what I mean?
And honestly, it doesn't seem right. But this is where you start getting into. It's difficult for people sometimes like me and you, who part of it's a hobby, part of it's a business.
Yeah,
Like you're working on the store, but you're working on the store because this is something you love and you're passionate about.
right.
So I don't think that Kobe, in my eyes, is going to be going anywhere from your hands.
No,
I,
I would sell it. I wouldn't even ask for PSA 10 money at the moment. So give me between the SGC 10 and the PSA 10. I have more of those. I actually have some coming in that order from PSA, and I'm hoping some of those are 10s. So then I won't be anywhere near as heartbroken. But
make it a lot
but,
easier. But it's,
but
that
yeah, I know what you're
speculation.
saying.
Go
It's
ahead.
when you have it in a perfect 10 and it's a card that you're really 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 passionate about, you're probably not going to sell it anyway. So like you almost don't care what grade or what slab it's in because of what it costs. You don't have any value factor like that. It's just your favorite thing. So it's interesting how that kind of plays out. But yeah, having that huge disparity with the BGS 9.5 too. Let's throw that in there too. Not just all about SGC versus PSA, but the BGS 9.5, for example, which many people would argue would cross over to a PSA 10.
Mhm.
Most of the time, I guess, something like that. That sells for $320 on average versus the PSA 10 at over $1,000 for that same card. Again, something that makes no sense, right? Because you'd figure if people valued PSA then BGS then SGC in terms of money, and popularity, that the BGS would maybe be in that as equal to an SGC 10, right?
Mhm.
At the very minimum, but even potentially more. So it's
And
tough,
like, and again, that comes down to us as consumers.
right?
You know, it we have to validate and give credit to these companies where they're due, and it's hard, when you're trying to either make a buck or figure out your way and navigate your path in the hobby. If you're trying to do more than just a hobby, you have to be willing to sometimes, I guess, give up at a loss, but at the same time, I this is where, like, one of the questions to me is, are the factors of the price of grading going into said prices of the card? So it's PSA is the most well-known brand, yes, so on and so forth. But just because you get it graded in a PSA, does it deserve, I guess you want to call it a buyer's or a seller's premium?
Right, right. I think about that actually quite a bit when I'm looking on eBay, or even sometimes thinking about trying to sell on eBay. It's like, okay, this card was a $5 card or whatever, and happened to get a 10, cost me X, to grade it. Do I just add the money together and then expect more on top of that? Like, is that a real thing? I don't think it is actually, because people pay the market for a card. Just because you paid XYZ to do anything to a card doesn't mean you should expect anything residually from someone else who wants to buy that card. I mean, I don't think that's a really fair way to look at anything in life. But, on the flip side of that, there was a point in time where I would buy PSA 9 and above of just about any good player, as long as it was in a, slab for under like $12, because I'm like, it cost them physically more money in real life than what I'm paying them to have that card in that slab, but that was when you could bulk submit at $12, so it's a little different story. But I still bought a bunch of them, and I still have quite a few of what I bought when I did that. But the point I'm making though is, like, now you look at that and you're like, okay, well, anything modern, anything that's been released since they shut down has been a minimum of $50, but most 100. And it's like, you see these slabs of stuff that's been released in that time frame selling for $30. And you're like, who wants to take that financial loss?
And I think that's a very kind of good segue into kind of go into, why are we grading? Like, because, a lot of these people are grading, like you said, like when you go to shows and you see these nines being sold for basically a loss in our head, like that's how we look at it. But it's that price differential, again, between even the 10s across SGC, but the 9 to a 10, like that variance is so large, I think, across every grading company, whether it be a PSA, an SGC, BGS, whatever it is.
Right.
That's from 10 to 9 is usually a exponential amount of difference in money. So I think that when you have, people who are submitting 100 of one card, if they get, 5 or 6 10s out of it, those 5 or 6 10 sales will have paid for the whole lot.
Depending on what the card is, yeah.
Yeah. If they're grading the right thing. And I also believe that that's kind of the reason why we're in this kind of sticky situation of what grading is right now, a turnaround, is that you had everybody that kind of jumped into the card community with COVID and being locked down. So it had a strong forge, and people are seeing these cards sell for a lot of money, and they think it's every card.
Right.
But it's not.
Right.
Like,
and they think they can get 10s on everything too.
Yeah. And it's like, it's one of those situations like, if you're listening to me, please stop grading base. Stop.
You can grade base, but it has to be prism only. That's the only base you should ever grade.
Yeah, anything like in a chrome base possibly, but paper base, like, I see all this stuff up. Like I saw now the other day where it's a card that I collect personally. Okay. It's literally the card I collect. And a guy submitted 100 of them to CSG.
Okay.
Has them all on eBay right now for cheaper probably than it is to go through the grading process and all that. But I'm like, why are you grading a dollar card?
Yeah, what's the point of that in the first place?
I don't see it. If every card was a 25x multiplier, you would have people grading everything. But I truly believe that that's something that the newer people into the hobby need to learn. Is that, if you want it for you, do that. But it's also, if you want it for you, there's no reason to pay the exponential prices of a PSA, of a BGS to get it back faster, all that kind of stuff, because you're not going to make the money on it. So send it to a different company. If it's truly for you, it shouldn't really matter what slab it's in.
Right.
Like for me, like I said, I'll be sending some stuff to RCG. I don't care what name is on it. I just want my stuff protected for me.
Right.
That way down the road, whether it's a storm, smoke, whatever it may be, water, you never know what's going to happen. To have your cards protected is going to do you a lot across the board. But it's just, these price ways, I think that we as consumers need to kind of help push them one way or the other. And that's only going to happen with seeing more and more of these grades coming out and what we're willing to pay.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, I think another, big reason that people grade a card that have no intention of flipping it, right? Because there's plenty of people out there that are looking to grade their card for their PC or to protect it, or whatever their kind of alternative thing is. And I kind of think it's the same thing as almost like taking a picture of it, and then encapsulating it in time with that's how that card's going to look forever until something happens to that slab. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? Like nothing further can happen to it. And I think that's the cool part. So then you can say, well, we've kind of well, what would you say, preserved it the way it's, the way it should be or whatever, especially if it's a 10. So that, I think that's an interesting aspect of it. It's almost like taking a picture of it, but being able to hold on to it in real time. It's cool, right?
That's the thing, is just figuring out which service is best for you. So I recommend to everyone, do your homework. And it's also stay within your price realm. Like for me, like when I started just getting into this whole industry, if you want to call it that, or whatever I'm trying to do, I set myself a budget. Yes, my finances are good, my bills are paid, but it's also, you never want to overextend into anything.
Right.
Because if you have a budget for yourself where you allow yourself to spend a percentage of whatever you're earning, so on and so forth, but you send cards off, you send 10 cards off to, let's just call it BGS. Okay, we're gonna do standard service 10 cards, doing subgrades on all of them. That's $500.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and
That's
it's
no
gonna take,
joke, dude. That's a lot of milk money, man.
it is, and it's one of those things when you look into that, that's a 6 to 9 month service. Okay, so you can't go in with the expectation of, okay, I'm going to send these 10 cards in. They're all going to 10. They're worth this much right now. So I'm not really spending $500. I really have X money. That's
Right.
not how this works.
Nope, you don't have any of that money because that could be all zero money.
Exactly. Any player can get hurt. They go down. They're done. I mean, look at Tatis right now. I don't understand how in a $300 million plus contract he's allowed to ride motorcycles. I
Yeah.
don't get it, but it's hurting the value of his cards right now because he's going to miss some of the season.
Right.
And not only is it hurting the value of his card, but it's also hurting his team.
Yeah.
Like,
And his career. I mean,
supposed to
everything.
exactly. So there's a lot that goes into it. Just do the research, look into it for yourself, but it's also enjoy the hobby, but do it on a budget. Don't
Right.
ever go outside your means. I
Grading is
mean,
expensive. It's what he's trying to say.
100%, but it's not going to be an immediate turnaround.
Right.
So it's one of those things where, if you got to take 2-3 weeks of not going to the local card shop or staying off eBay or whatever it is to get those grades done, make sure that you do that. Protect yourself as much as your investments that you have out, protect yourself as well.
I would agree. Always keep the smarts going. Don't be dumb with the money. So, other reasons to grade cards is just purely for the flip, right? You get seasonality, you get the start of any season, hot new rookie, flip them quick. But then the people who decide to hold can get much more value in the long run if it's a good hit. But that's prospecting, and that's way different, and that's a very risky way to play grading.
It definitely is. It's one of those things too where you have to look into like certain players. Like for me, like if any of you have been watching or following along, you guys all know I'm a Wander guy. So all of my Wander stuff will be at a minimum going to an SGC grading service. Me and Nick were talking off camera about possibly using RCG just to see if they do a full spectrum of the rainbow, which I think would be extremely awesome to see. And also, for the people who are in the secondary market, it's kind of hard to advertise yourself at a show, at a display, without going absolutely crazy. But if you could do it with the cards themselves. So, like we said with the RCG, doing these different types of slabs, if I send in a rainbow and the whole slab comes back a color and I have a rainbow set up, you're going to see that from across the room.
Mm-hmm.
this is also why, like Nick said earlier about CSG listening to their consumer about changing that label. People thought the label was ugly, and they realized, okay, well, what do we do? Do we stick with what we think is correct, or do we listen to the consumer, which is the people who are paying our bills?
Mm-hmm.
They listen to the consumer. So, like, this is where I'm very intrigued to see what happens on the secondary market, where you had everyone complain about, oh, these labels are ugly. Well, guess what? They're not ugly anymore. Now prove it by buying the product.
Yeah, what's the excuse at this point if you don't want to get graded by them, right? People saying
Exactly.
they're tough grades, you got to take everything into consideration, their grading scales, all those different reasons. And, I think also we were wanting to explain that, the tiers, you got to keep your PSA tier grading is really high end, expensive cards because the resale value is going to be there. BGS being number 2 in resale most of the time, and SGC now though giving it a fight, for its life. But some of these other guys, these RCG, CSG, HGA, all these other little companies, somewhat little, or newish, I guess we can call them at least. These companies are coming, and they're coming with really cool colors, and they're coming with, great pricing and transparent turnaround. The few times I've interacted with customer service at some of these other ones, excellent customer service. So, I think you can't stay on top forever. But I don't know that we need to have anybody on top. I think there's room for a lot of these companies to exist. So
Oh,
that's a good segue into the future of grading, which is our next segment here. So the future of grading in the next year looks pretty awesome because everybody's kind of fighting for some landscape and what happens when people fight for it? Well, then we've got better turnarounds everywhere. We've got more innovation. We've got, companies partnering up and buying other companies with automation. It's getting intense out there. If you're following this stuff really, really closely, the future of it though in 5 years is a little less certain. I have some thoughts on SGC, rising up to a just underneath or equal to PSA level. Maybe that's a pipe dream. But BGS, I think gets left a little bit in the dust. I don't know that they've been able to innovate as much. But there's still specific reasons to use them. I know that for sure. With their auto authentication as well as auto grading. I don't know that they're going anywhere, but I think they'll become a very far out number 3 at some point, as far as options go. But yeah, I mean, it's exciting though. I think the future looks really neat. Robert, what do you think, man? What do you think? 5, 10 years? What's your gut tell you?
honestly, we'll just start off with the first year, and it's something that again flew right by my mind, but popped up in yours. Is when you have these companies competing with one another, it's great for us as consumers and patrons of said companies.
Right.
It makes all these companies bump their, whether it be customer service, emails, Instagram, phone calls, whatever it is, it makes them bump all of that stuff up. I mean, I also believe that we'll possibly see this with the actual card world as well. I'm sure you probably have some redemptions that have been sitting off at Panini for a while.
I have
I mean,
not. None.
oh, you're
I,
you're, you're lucky.
I'm a non-redemption guy.
I'm sitting on I think we're getting ready to go into the 15th month
Ooh,
of waiting for redemption from Panini right now. So, but I think that's a very, very good fact. And also with these companies being forced to compete, it'll also thin the herd. It's going to
sure.
be a natural Darwin selection. And like I said, I'm kind of going off the rails here, and I like to have these hot takes. But I think RCG will put HGA out of business for the people that were looking for that colored slab.
Dang.
Um, that's just something that I see happening. 5 years down the road, I think you're going to see, with the hobby still growing as it is, I'm not sure how much different 5 years will actually be from right now.
Okay.
Um,
So pretty similar trajectory maybe for the next 5 years.
I hope it's hard to say because the hobby itself is going to be changing over the next 5 years with everything going on with fanatics and all that
Yes.
kind of stuff.
Yep.
So I eventually see, possibly the 10-year mark, that the grading companies are going to be tiered. Your super high end products, your flawless, your NTs, stuff that we know the exact number of case runs, how many cards there are. I think those things are going to be going to the PSAs and the BGSs. I still think that BGS, like you said, one of the biggest things they have is the authentication process.
Mm-hmm.
That's massive because a lot of these other companies do not have that right now. And that's something that if they want to stay in the game, that I believe eventually they're going to either have to get into
Mm-hmm.
or just relinquish the fact of, guys, we're never going to touch that. That's not going to be what we're here for.
Right.
If you want that stuff authenticated, use BGS, use PSA. And that's in my mind. Like, I don't know if I'm SGC, what do? Do I try to go pick up authenticators and add that stuff to the market where I might get flooded with more and more and more product that affects me across the board? But it's also with not doing it, you don't take the chance of ever
Screwing it
sending
up.
out a fake autograph.
Right.
So
Their insurance is probably better just because of that.
it's one of those things where for them as a business, is it worth it for them?
Right. They might not see it that way at this moment, but they definitely could, if they wanted to, they could probably open up another place and have them all funneled through there and charge more for it like BGS does and PSA does and move on with it.
That'll definitely have to be a topic when we get someone from that company on a show with us one day.
That would be an excellent question. That would be an excellent question. What does that process look like?
Make a note on that right now.
There you go. Write that one down. So what about, if you don't think it looks too much different in say 5 years, in 10 years, we have a lot less of them, right?
I think that we have a lot less. I mean, let's look at it from like a car perspective, automobiles.
Sure.
Everywhere you go, in America, we have, our top 5, top 6 dealers or manufacturers, so on and so forth. But when you go to Europe, you have a whole nother set of manufacturers.
Yep.
So with the card market hitting the global aspects, I think that you're going to actually see some European companies eventually want to get into the grading aspect. Because if I'm a European, I'm not trying to send my cards over an ocean.
That's a good take.
So, and
talk about turnaround times, you'd be waiting for a boat.
And the only reason I say this is because doing some research into the RCG, they have paired up and partnered with Panini Germany.
Right. I did see that.
So I think that this is an outlet where I think that RCG is happy with where they're at, doing what they're doing, but also trying to grow the business at such a point to not flood themselves, but also keep it good for the consumers.
Right.
So I think you might see some of these people open up some factories or some grading houses in Europe. You got PSA right now that's building a secondary facility on the East Coast of the United States, which I hope will also help lessen their shipping times, their turnaround times, which I think will be huge. And that's going to be, to me, the biggest thing in the next physical year to really tell us what's going to happen in the grading market itself is how much that changes PSA.
Yeah. Sustainability on their price points, though, I don't know if it's real. You know what I mean? I don't know if they stay there as long as they've been there. It doesn't, like the future of pricing for grading, I think continually goes down. I think it's going to be a race to the bottom again. I could be alone in that opinion, but I really do think that eventually, because we know the hobby ebbs and flows. There's more people coming in, less people going out, less people coming in, more people going out. It changes all the dang time. And so trajectory, though, I mean, depending on what happens over the next 2 years, if we lose 40% of the hobby, somehow it just evaporates and dries up for whatever reason, because it's possible. Literally, how many of these grading companies are left and how many of them are still charging $100 for a 90-day turn?
Oh, God.
You know what I mean?
If we could get to a point where we're talking CSG pricing across the board
for everybody,
that would be ideal for me. Now, the only thing with CSG is that their subgrades are an add-on price. So I would love to see it get into a point of maybe even if it's CSG plus 10% across the board, taking their bulk to, say 15,
Yeah.
economy 25, standard 33 to 35, express 60, walkthrough 130. To me, those numbers are great, but I also believe that that's what PSA is going to be able to do. When you're buying a whole other facility, not only is it a whole other facility, but you're hiring a whole other team.
Right.
So as they take their graders from, say they have 60 to 80 graders, whatever it is working right now, when they multiply that into 160 graders, it's going to cut their turnaround times literally in half. So if we look at PSA, an Express, which is, I want to say like a 20 day is $150 a card.
Mm-hmm.
If that gets knocked down to $75,
Then it's a little better.
that's real in the realm of everything. It's higher than everybody else still, but in regards to the percentage of them in the secondary market, with PSA being around the longest, being the most well-known,
You'll get that money back.
Exactly. The premium of that is kind of canceling it out, so PSA will automatically be the best route to go.
Do you
So
think
that's
do you think PSA's premium will ever fall away for any reason?
Unless some kind of scandal happens where they're backdooring cards at all tens, or somewhere down the road a bunch of stuff comes out unauthentic, like we've seen with Baseball Card House the past couple of months with these boxes that they authenticated,
Mm-hmm.
and then they turn out to not be what they authenticated it as.
Right.
If they stay true to what they've been doing for the past 30 years, that's like me saying, do you think Honda is ever going to take over Mercedes worldwide?
No.
It's just not going to happen. And, no one really talks about the price difference in a Honda versus a Mercedes, but realistically, what are you trying to go point A to point B? Are you trying to have, that's kind of the same thing with grading. I look at some of these grading companies as, okay, point A to point B, I protected my card, it's in the slab, it did its job.
Yep. Okay.
And then, okay, I'm going out with, going to impress, I'm going to an interview, I'm going to a conference. I want to show up in a limousine. I want to show up in a Mercedes, a BMW,
Tuxedo,
a Lexus. Those are exactly going to be your PSAs, your BGSs, your SGCs.
Right on.
So
All right.
it's one of those things where everything has comparisons. It's just, like I said, do your homework, spend the time. Don't watch all these other shows. Watch them, but watch them all. Don't just watch us.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
If you're only watching us, you're not getting enough information for this hobby yet. Not yet.
Yeah.
Wait till we get to episode like 100 and then watch all 100, and then you'll be close. But either way. Okay, so that's the future of grading, folks. We think that everybody's got a place. Not all 190 companies out there, but we think that at least 7 or 10 of them will exist maybe in the future, and it looks bright for us as collectors because they're doing a better job, and we think prices are going to get lower. So, all right, this is the last segment of this episode. We drew another one out to an hour long. Yay, us. But I'll go first. So mine, you actually already saw it, and it's this SGC 10 Kobe. I'll tell you why it's special for 2 reasons. I bought this card raw off of eBay. I submitted this myself after prepping it. I didn't do anything glorious. I just took a microfiber cloth to it and made sure the surface didn't have anything on it. And then I sent it in, and I got one of my first 10s ever in grading. It's Kobe rookie. It's just awesome to me. I love this one. I would sell it. I really would, but I'm not going to right now. Only in the shop once it opens. So that's my favorite slabbed card of the moment. Robert, what do you got for us, buddy?
My favorite is I'm going to stay true to myself. This is actually the first card I've ever had graded. I pulled it myself.
There you go.
9.5 Wander Franco 2021 Bowman Prospects out of 399. This card is literally what drove me to doing rainbows.
Nice.
When I started getting back into the sports card hobby, I fell in love with the colors. And for me, my go-to is not autographs. It's not the signatures. It's numbered product. I like knowing exactly how many of a card there are. There are 399 of these.
Perfect.
And therefore, this is one of that 399. I have a bunch more, but it's knowing that there's not always going to be floating around, and it's going to be something that I know there's a finite number of, and I think in this community, in this industry, finite numbers are going to be the longest running and probably the best investments long term.
I second that. I think that's courageous statement, actually. Good job. So yeah, those are our favorite slab cards of the moment. Both of them SGC. That's weird. So thanks guys for tuning into this episode. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends how boring or how awesome we are. You choose, but just tell your friends. Thank you. We'll see you
Thank you
next
guys.
time.